Welcome to the Day with Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run this show here every Friday, essentially to allow the audience, you, to ask questions about data vault, cloud technologies, big data, anything data-driven, data relevant, essentially. You can use the chat in this client. You can use the Q&A option here in the client. You can just raise your hand if you want. I would give you a voice. And you can also use a form, which I will show you after the after today's session, essentially. And if you receive multiple questions, I would cherry pick questions, essentially, depending on the sometimes I want to set a team or I want to set some topics, general topics. So my cherry pick, and it's time boxed, so typically 10 to 15 minutes. That's how much I want to especially spend to discuss questions. Makes a good YouTube format, so that's why. And if there's no questions, we will talk about a cluster. We did once. So now we received a question here. Essentially, let me just find the. I'm doing this not for the very first time, but there you go. Essentially, a question on the use of how we use logical industry models in the Data Vault 2.0 architecture, and that's why I wanted to set up the tablet here in order to draw you something. That's where the value comes from today. So the question here is this: so they built apparently a Data Vault 2.0 architecture, and they have essentially integrate not only Data Vault 2.0 approach or model, but also a industry model. And we know these from database vendors sometimes or often, and from sometimes also from industry models, industry bodies. For example, for the banking sector or something, there's typically some models available. And the question is now, how do we integrate this logical model into the Data Vault 2.0 architecture? Because that's what they did. So they loading the data essentially into the raw data vault first, comes from the source, gets into the raw data vault, and then the business vault is then following the logical design. However, it's still in data vault style, which is good, but the data vault or the business vault has been derived from the logical model. So they want to come up essentially with the definitions from the logical model, use that essentially for defining the business vault, and then they have the access layer, the business access layer, the information marts, where they then provide the star schemas, the snowflake schemas, flat and byte structures based on the business vault, essentially. And so it looks like a best of breed approach, because you're using, or at least the idea is, to use the best from two worlds, from the data vault 2.0 and from the logical model, actually from enterprise modeling, essentially, right? So it sounds good, right? But here's the thing, but somehow they lost the agility, essentially, in the project. But where? Well, I can't tell you where. So the challenge is this. Okay, so you should see, yeah, my whiteboard. Okay, so they got the, you know what? I'm using red to influence you a bit here, right? So we got the source systems. And then they have a essentially staging area somehow. I'm drawing the logical model or the logical architecture based on relation structures. It's just easier from a drawing standpoint here, essentially. It's not that I would recommend a relation staging area anymore, right? So they got staging area, and then they got a raw data vault, and they have essentially the logical model in here. Let's call it, yeah, industry model. Industry integrated logical model or industry logical model or something. And then we got the information mart. So all the queries, or all the data flows must go from the source through staging through the raw data vault. Then it gets re-wrangled, reassigned by the or transformed by the logical structures into the information mart. Sounds like a great idea. The problem is, and that's what we consider here as the business vault, business V. Problem is this: when we talk about the architecture, we say that up until the raw data vault, everything is more functional oriented, which means it follows the structures from the source. So we model in the raw data vault the source data as it is being used by the business. That's the idea of the raw data vault. The problem now is when you get your information requirements, the business has a, let's say, an understanding of the business or an expectation of what you should produce, some star schema with some measures in there and so on, dimensions, granularities, but they might not know the reality in the source systems. So there's typically a gap between what the end user wants in their star schema or information mart and what you have in the raw data vault. Because what you get is all the dirty data, it's all in foreign currencies, you have to deduplicate the records and so on, all this kind of stuff, right? Or missing data and so on. So to bridge this gap between what you have in the raw data vault and the end user expectation, that is the purpose of the business vault. It should bridge the gap by transforming, cleansing the raw data into the information, essentially. Now, that's the purpose of the business vault. Here, the purpose is to provide a more generalized model to describe the bank or the automotive or something from a industry perspective. That's fine. I'm not challenging the use of an ILM. I'm just challenging where you want to place it, because that's not the purpose of the business vault. It's not the purpose of generalizing your business somehow and then providing some or using some logical designs here. Now, what I would do is this. First of all, everything I'm talking here about is I'm not challenging the industry model. If somebody in your organization wants it, fine, I'm happy to produce it, but just not in between the raw data, in the raw data vault and the information mart. Why? Because I can directly generate any target from the data vault, which includes the raw data vault and the business vault, where I transform my data and bridge the gap, right? So I can directly derive any target model from the data vault model, and I don't need a logical model in between for that. Okay, so that's number one, right? So we're not having this model down here. And you know what? Let me just use green on a new page, so we get the sources. It's not that I'm trying to influence you in any way, right? So don't get me wrong on this one. At least I'm open on it, right? So we got the stage, the raw data vault. Well, let's do it right one. The business vault. And then we got the information marts. And one of those information marts, so I'm getting it out of the way first, right? It has nothing to do inside or in between the raw data vault and the information marts. What I'm doing is to place the ILM down here as an information mart. I can see the value of the industry logical model, for example, for ad hoc queries. When you have people who know the industry logical models well, and they want to understand the bank, for example. They want to understand the bank from a more industry perspective, which is great, but that's where this model is great at, right? Let's say you have an auditor in place or regulator or something, I don't know. Or maybe new employees who just came from a different bank, know the ILM, for example, and want to apply that. All good. So they can use the information mart now, where you place the ILM for ad hoc queries, for example. And to be honest, I wouldn't stick to data vault here. The ILM comes in a more integrated. You have an integrated third number form typically, right? That's what you provide as a information mart. So I see some value, but now comes the question: is it worth the money? Because it takes some time to build it, right? To even build it at this place. So you need to spend some effort of generalizing your data, make it fit, make your bank fit into, or your organization fit into this industry model. And that's effort. So the question becomes, is it worth the money? I can't make the decision. You or your business user, your sponsor has to make the decision. As a forecast in most organizations where we apply this concept here, to get it out of the way, the cost becomes transparent. So you see the cost behind the ILM, and most organizations decide not to go forward with it. But that's essentially up to you and your business sponsor. Essentially, I don't care. I'm not, as I said, I'm not challenging it. I'm not even challenging the value, because it's not my job here. I just want to make sure it's not in the way between my raw data and the information I need to produce. I don't need that for that purpose. And if I have to provide it, I'm happy to do that. I see the biggest value as an ad hoc query model here, and I'm happy to do that as an information mart. And you or your organization, your sponsor, they must decide if it's worth the money or not. I don't care, to be honest. I'm a consultant, right? So I'm building it. So that's all good. And that's how he places logical models. It's not part of the data flow for your regular reports, essentially, or dashboards. It can reuse business rules from down here. So you could use the business rules from here, from the business world, feeding into the logical model. And I would follow the same concept as I would use with any other information mart. I would try to reuse as many business rules as possible. So when I need some transformation rules for the ILM, I would place them in the business world so I can reuse them for other targets. That's just great. And that's how I would deal with that. And that's the value of the ILM as well, to get these business rules for generalization purposes into the business world. So I might reuse them in some other business worlds. That's an additional value, let's say. That's how I would use it, to be honest. And that maintains your agility, essentially, to produce any target you want, but you don't have to go through the logical design anymore, extend it all the time, refactor it all the time. That takes most of your agility, essentially. That takes most of your time, kills your agility, essentially, when you place it in between the raw data vault and the information mart as a business vault or something. I know a lot of customers doing this, especially data vault 1.0 designs, but it's not a good idea. And it's not an advice idea. So stick to this model. That's much better from a loading perspective, from an agility perspective, essentially. And to be honest, I've never seen it working. So I've never seen it working in the diagram. This architecture, I've never seen working. About what means work and what means success here, right? So if you define success as being able to deliver information every 4 weeks, then I have never seen it working. Let's phrase it like this. So I've never seen that happen. All right, so that's the answer. How do I get out? So good question. If you have a question like this, use the form here, https://sfr.ee/dvfriday. However, we're not going to answer next week because we have the Christmas party, hopefully, at Scalefree, the internal one. Let's see if it's, let's hope for the best. I'm not sure what the laws allows us, but let's see if we can go for it or not. And but at least planned for next week, Friday. And then is in Germany, we have the Heiligabend on the 24th. And then is the 31st, which is Silvester, right? And so the next opportunity to meet, to be honest, is the first week in January, the first Friday in January. That's when the next Data Vault Friday happens, essentially. So now you see what you're missing, right? But yeah, so have a nice Christmas, Christmas fest. If you're enjoying it, essentially, from a religious standpoint, have a nice Happy New Year. That's what most people enjoy. And yeah, hope to see you on the first Friday. It should be the, let me just double check. Actually, this one. That is the 7th. January 7th is the next time we meet for the Data Vault Friday. And until then, I hope you all the best. Snowy Christmas and Happy New Year, guys. Thank you for joining and see you on next year, essentially. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.